From Bloomberg QuickTake, I'm Madison Mills. It's election day and record-breaking numbers of people are casting their ballots. This is particularly noticeable in Texas, where voters have already surpassed the number of ballots cast in the entirety of the 2016 election before the polls even opened today. Joining us to discuss how voting is working in Houston and across the state of Texas is Mayor Turner. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to just jump right in here. How is voting going across the state of Texas, and particularly in your district? Have there been any issues in polling stations that have come up for you today?
You know, on balance, Madison, things have gone well. People are proceeding to vote. There's been minimal intimidation factors. We've had some people, I guess they call themselves the election protectors, people with the Trump campaign. Dressed in dark clothing that have gone to a number of polling places and sat down kind of like in front of the polling places far enough away, you know, within the legal geographical limits, kind of serving as like an intimidation factor. But people have simply ignored them and have pushed right through. They are determined to vote. So, but there hasn't been any what I call any direct confrontation, which is good. So by and large, things have gone quite well. It's a beautiful day in the city of Houston, 70 degrees, sunshiny weather, and people are exercising their fundamental rights.
And moving ahead from tonight, do you anticipate any violence or unrest if either candidate wins? I've heard from several voters across the state of Texas today who are a bit concerned about vigilante activity if Biden takes this election, for example.
You know, I'm hoping that things will remain very peaceful, that people will celebrate the rights of people to participate in the election process. Now, of course, we've prepared for the worst, hoping for the very, very best. And so we are hoping that everyone, regardless of who they vote for, regardless of what the outcome of the elections will be tonight or tomorrow or 2 or 3 days from now, that people will continue to be very respectful of the process, regardless of whether or not your person prevails or not. So we haven't heard a lot of chatter. You know, there's been some, but by and large, things have gone well. I've not gotten any report from the law enforcement agencies in the city that they are overly concerned about anything. But we partnered up with county law enforcement agencies as well as others. So we've got people positioned, you know, all over the city. Again, we're hopeful that things will be fine, and we're asking people to simply exercise their right to vote and then respect the process, whatever the outcomes may be.
And millions of people have been recognizing their right to vote across the state of Texas. Why do you think voters are so energized to vote in this election season in particular?
Well, people are engaged. Madison, for this election, it's personal. When you think, for example, of 230,000 Americans who have lost their lives to the coronavirus, well over 8 million people who have come down with the virus. Many of them, for example, are senior citizens. People of color. I mean, people are engaged. This is a time in which the country appears to be more divided than ever, which is not good. People are exhausted of things that have taken place in this country, for example, over the last 4 years. So people, I think, are tired of the division. People are tired of one group being pit against another. We are proud Americans. And we recognize that where we are at this moment in time, we're not operating at our very best. And so, for many people, when they've either lost their jobs or been furloughed because of the continuation, the way this virus has been handled, this is a very personal election for so many families, so many individuals, young people, this younger generation. They are concerned about their future. We have had more younger people vote in this election, more than double than what took place in 2016. To give me an example, in the state of Texas, over 800,000 of the people who have voted are people under the age of 30 and below. 66% of that number are students and younger individuals who did not vote at all in 2016. So they have a personal stake, and they're concerned about their future, and they're voting not for yesterday. They are voting for tomorrow and the days and weeks and years to come.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the record-breaking number of young people who are voting in this election, yes. And it seems that there's certainly a lot of energy around this election throughout the state of Texas. I'm wondering how you'll plan to handle just the number of incoming ballots. What's the plan for counting these ballots out, and what will you do if perhaps the results in Texas are contested by one of the candidates?
Well, I will tell you that Chris Hollins, who is a young person, the county clerk of Harris County, the Harris County clerk, Chris Holland, has done a masterful job of making voting accessible to people throughout Harris County. He's been innovative. He's put together an outstanding team, and they've just done a marvelous, marvelous job. And as a result, more people voted early this year more so than all of the people who voted in 2016. For the entire election cycle in 2016. So that speaks volumes. I issued, for example, the Mayor's College Challenge, challenging the students at Texas Southern University, University of Houston, and Rice to compete amongst themselves, their campuses, as who could come up with the most votes on their respective campuses, since we had voting at those particular locations. And today, for example, along with Chris Hollins, Harris County clerk, we gave that award out to Rice University. Those 3 college campuses alone had more than 21,000 persons who voted on their respective campuses. So the students, like my daughter, engaged in the process. They've been participating in the process. At Rice University, that polling place was manned by nothing but students themselves. So now we're expecting a lot of numbers to come in. A little after 7 o'clock Central Time, for example, that 1.4 million people who cast their vote during the early voting process, those results will be announced in Harris County. So it's not going to, in Harris County in Texas, this is not going to be a situation where people are going to have to wait, 2 or 3 days. I think we're going to have some results maybe late into the night, but certainly I think in the next 24 hours, we'll know what the results will be in the state of Texas, and specifically how people vote in Harris County.
That's, I'm sure, very exciting for a lot of people listening to this who are really hoping to get a result tonight. But I am curious, moving ahead from the results, let's say we do get a result from Texas within the next 24 hours. Okay. What if one of the candidates contests the results? How do you and other lawmakers throughout Texas plan to respond to that?
Well, we still, I still believe in the legal process. This is a great country. I think we all take an oath to the Constitution that we will protect the rights as defined in the Constitution itself. And people have the right to contest. That is their right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will prevail on the merits. And so I think when all is said and done, I think there's a fundamental principle that when people cast their vote, when they get registered and when they vote in a process that's been duly sanctioned, for example, by the county, by the Secretary of State, by the state of Texas, for example, or any other jurisdiction, that their vote should be valid. Their vote should count. To the extent a person believes that they have been wronged and they want to contest that within the judicial process, that is their right. It's my hope, though, that the judicial system will look at it, will judge those claims based on the merits. And if those claims are not meritorious, then they will be rejected. If their claims are meritorious, then we will deal with them accordingly. But I am I'm the mayor of this city. I've been served in the legislature for 27 years. I've been a lawyer for 40 years. I've been an American for as long as I have lived. I believe in this country that the principles for which many people have fought and died, that those principles are still very much alive today, and they will be honored in this democratic process that we call voting.
I can't help but be reminded with some of the language you're using about some of the speeches I was lucky to hear you give on the campaign trail. I'm curious, what has the experience of this election cycle been like for you on the local level? It feels like this has gone on for years. So
Yes.
what has that been like for you, just experiencing this campaign as a local official?
But let me tell you, this has been an election season like none other. Not only has this been a very painstaking year, 2020, with the coronavirus and everything that people have suffered, but this election season seems like it has gone on for quite some time. It's been not only competitive, but it's been highly divisive. The rhetoric, the language, the allegations, the things that have been said have made it a very difficult year for so many. It's my hope that that as we move forward, that this country will find its way. One of the things that I've said many times on the campaign trail and things that I've posted is that there comes a point in time when you have to hit the reset button. Okay, when you have to recognize that when you're going off course, and you have to chart a new course, that you have to hit the reset button. This is one of those times, and I'm hoping when all the votes have been cast, that the American people will have hit the reset button, and this country will again recognize that we are the United States of America. That it doesn't matter who the mayor may be, it doesn't matter what party that mayor may be with, or whether you're a Democratic mayor, Republican mayor, Democratic governor, Republican governor, it does not matter. That we all are Americans, and that whoever wins, you represent not only those who voted for you, but you also represent those who voted against you. In fact, once the votes have been counted and a winner has been proclaimed, then you forget about whether or not it was 51-49% or 55-45%. You represent 100% of the people in your city or in your state or in your country. And I'm hoping that we will, whoever is chosen, will recognize that and will serve in the best interest of the United States of America. And the only question that one should ask is what's in the best interest of our country or our state or our county or our city. That's my hope, and I just believe that will take place, Madison. And so I'm still very much excited. You know, I did with my mom and dad. Neither one of them graduated from high school, but for them, voting was a must. Okay, voting was a must, and they're not here today. So, but when I cast my vote with them in mind, because it meant a great deal to them, and it means a great deal to me, and it means a great deal to my daughter, and for so many others that live within our great country.
Thank you for sharing that, Mayor Turner. Is your daughter a first-time voter?
No, my daughter voted for me when I ran for mayor 5 years ago, but this was her first time. No, this was not her first time. She voted in 2016. So this was her second time voting in a presidential election.
I'm sure she was very proud to be able to vote for you. While we still have you, we have a couple minutes left. I do want to ask you about what you think about this record-breaking turnout in Texas. Typically, record-breaking turnout is better for Democrats, but we're also seeing that a lot of people are voting in these more rural areas throughout your state, which could lead to higher levels of voters for Trump. Where do you predict this is going to come out? I know that's a heavy-handed question, but where do you think we're going to see this result tomorrow?
Well, number one, let me just say this. I'm excited for people to vote, regardless of whether they're voting in rural America or whether they're voting in suburban or in urban America. The very fact that people are exercising their right to vote is good in a democratic system. And your vote is your voice. So I have no problem with that at all. And I would encourage people to vote, regardless of where they live geographically, what their social economic background may be. I think that is good. That is good for our democracy. So that's number one. Number two, and historically, Texas has been a low voting state. This time around, Texas has reversed that. We have come from being a low voting state to be one of the best voting states. So that tells you just how consequential and how important this election is. And so a lot of people have been voting. In 2016, 8.9 million people voted in the state of Texas. At the end of the early voting process last Friday, that number was 9.7 million before anybody even started voting on November 3rd, today, Tuesday. So that number would be much, much higher. And for the first time in a long time, Texas is a competitive state, very competitive. I am hoping with all is said and done, that when people look at Texas, that they will see that people in Texas voted for transformation, that we voted to hit the reset button. And I think there's a good opportunity for this Texas to go from being a low voting state to a high voting state, and a state that goes from being red to being blue. If nothing else, being very, very much purple. And I think that's good for everybody in our state and beyond. And I will tell you, to the extent, for example, if Texas goes from being red to purple to blue, it will transform the political discourse, not only in the state of Texas, but in this country as a whole.
That's an interesting point. Do you think that if Texas goes blue, it will change the way the GOP kind of strategizes moving forward?
No, not only will it change the way the GOP strategizes, it will change the way the Democratic Party strategizes, because Texas will change the whole equation. What's on the line in today's election, for example, is not just who will be president of the United States, but the makeup of the Texas House of Representatives. Since 2003, when I was in the legislature, the Texas House and the Texas Senate and almost every statewide position have been held by Republicans. Today, in Texas, it is questionable whether or not the Texas House will remain, for example, in Republican control, or whether or not it will flip. If it flips, that will be monumental, because it will have been a long time since that has taken place, and that will change the politics. And then bear in mind, not only in the state of Texas, but in other states across the country, 2021 will be a redistricting year. We'll start redrawing the lines in legislatures all across America. And so the elections that are taking place today, that will culminate today, let me put it that way, will not only impact the state in which the presidential race, but it will impact congressional districts, those lines, state senatorial districts, state legislative districts, school board districts for the next 10 years. So today, across the country, in every state, it's not just about who will be the president and the vice president of the United States, but it will determine in large part how the lines, congressional lines and legislative lines will be drawn that will remain in place over the next decade. That's just how consequential this election is that's taking place, that's culminating today.
And final question for you on those consequences. You mentioned some of these down the ballot candidates. Are there any folks in particular you're really excited about who are running for Senate or any other down the ballot races that you're looking into?
You know, we've got some outstanding people who are running for congressional seats. So I'm looking at several of those. I'm really paying very close attention to our Texas House, the Texas legislature, who will be serving in the Texas House of Representatives, who will be serving in the Texas Senate. Look, I spent 27 years in the legislature. I know how important it is when it comes to redrawing the lines for congressional districts, Texas legislative districts, Senate districts. And so that's one of the reasons why this election is just so consequential. So I'm really following very closely who's going to prevail in those Texas House and Senate seats, and then who's going to make up the Texas congressional delegation. And then we've got a very competitive United States Senate race in Texas as well. So I tell people all the time, you know, who's the elected president, of course, is very, very important. No question about that. But many of the races that are down below can have a greater impact in so many ways on your day-to-day living, on your business, on the criminal justice system, your healthcare system, educational system. And so I tell people all the time, don't just go in and vote for the president and then walk out away from the booth. Go all the way down the ballot and make sure that you are selecting good people who will be representing you at every level of government. Because it's not one person, not even the president, that will impact your destiny, but it's the conglomerate, all of them put together, that will have an impact on your day-to-day living. As mayor of the city of Houston, I impact, for example, the pothole on your street, the weeds in your neighborhood, how your community is revitalized or redeveloped, your police force, your fire force, your municipal workers on a daily basis. So it's not just the president, though that is a highly important position, but it's also everyone that's serving below the president. So make sure that you go all the way down the ballot and don't shortchange yourself.
Mayor Turner, I could ask you questions all night, but I know you have a lot of election watching to do yourself, so we are going to let you go, but I can't thank you enough for making time for us. And for those of you watching, we're going to be live at the top of every hour tonight, giving you the latest election coverage that you need. So stick with us here at QuickTake for more, and have a great election night. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.